We were almost the same height. My name is Paul Malora, and tonight I will be reading for you the first part of a new short story I'm working on called Synchrotone, and that's the working title. Eventually it's going to be a special kind of story I like to call musical fiction, in which I interweave storytelling with the music that inspired the ideas. But that will come towards the end of the narrative, and so for tonight it will just be prose. And thank you for listening. I have no memory of when Yaya found me. Her driver, Luis, pulled me out of a pile of trash behind a crystal house and what was left of Torreon. I'd shat myself and bit my tongue, leaving a dried trickle of blood across my cheek. You smelled like the shits the dead take, Luis told me later, laughing. Maybe I'd wanted that high to be my last. I'd scored big that week, at least in the terms I'd come to think in, after I'd managed to jailbreak a whole shipping container of smart batteries for the local gang. I'd even fixed the boss's espresso machine afterwards. Once buzzed, he was a generous man. When Yaya came asking about me, he wouldn't have bullshitted. Not to her. This I remember, waking up cotton-mouthed in the back of Yaya's truck as it bounced along at high speed, gravel popcorning off the opposite side of the hot metal floor my shoulder was crushed against. At first, I was sure my head was being squeezed in a vice, but it was just the withdrawal symptoms. A cough rang out over the noise, hacking and unapologetic. A withered old woman sat bundled up across from me, a bolt-action rifle across her lap, one outstretched foot propping me up on my side. A lake of vomit had congealed between us. I made a croaking noise, then tried again. Just kill me. Not until you help me, she said, in perfect schoolteacher's English. It was Yaya. She looked frailer in person than in the hollow memes the kids swapped outside the soda shops and on the glowing political billboards that loomed over the slums with the blessing of gangs not to be stripped for tech. Seeing her hunched in the back of this rusty truck, I could have mistaken her for one of the countless migrants she'd made her name guiding northward in decades past. Everyone knew Yaya's legend, how she'd walked alone into the den of violent kidnappers and struck a deal for safe passage. How, no matter what the US military deigned to deploy in her path, she and her network stayed one step ahead. At least until the drones came. The earliest generations of biomechanical drones were basically pests. Their hive-like factories burrowed under the desert in search of raw materials and spawned broods of seekers the size of sparrows, which upon locating a migrant caravan would swarm and sting and spray chemical irritants. These supposedly humane methods of deterrence were a bad joke, the aftertaste of morally performative trial runs at Utah test sites. And the migrants pushed on anyway, like chemotherapy patients whose last hope means to be poisoned. It was nothing a desert fox like Yaya hadn't seen before. But the drones had been designed to replicate and evolve, and not just physically. Their self-learning AI had been given a simple objective, and the only hard boundaries were geographical. Lacking any kind of moral parameters, the drones quickly learned a more optimal path to stopping the migrant flow, killing every human in sight. When migrants fought back, the seekers evolved bigger and deadlier. When the gangs whose territory was encroached upon launched counterstrikes with anti-aircraft missiles, they were slaughtered. Within 2 years, every route north became a dead zone, haunted by a terror that even Yaya was powerless to comprehend, much less resist. Now, here she was, almost a decade later, and looking worse for it. She uncapped a bottle and splashed water on my face. I licked as many drops as I could reach with my mangled tongue. Those batteries were US military grade, she said. They told me you unlocked them in an hour. What's your name? Shelly, I said. Her snort might have been a laugh. You're no Shelly anymore. You're Pinky. State your name. David Gustafson. Bullshit. It was my turn to laugh until the ropes cut deeper. Okay, Mr. Gustafson, describe your children. I told her. I was only half lucid, but I'd done this spiel 1,000 times. Of course, most people never believed me, hearing a name as famous as Yaya's. The name of the AI engineer and US military contractor, the American with skin so pale he must have never left his lab, who'd betrayed his own country by leaking the details of what his government's compassionate interdiction program was actually about. But once people couldn't prove I wasn't him, I turned from threat or annoyance into a good joke. This coked out gringo pretending to be someone famous while offering to hack phones for a little money, a little weed. I had made many a score off this name, the name of someone who'd mattered. But Yaya's questions kept coming. And as the truck abandoned the gravel to shudder over rugged terrain and her interrogation ran on, I calmly, numbly told her about the prep school and water polo camp, about the masters in computational analysis, about the wedding in Saratoga Springs, the yellow house with the butterfly garden, soccer practices, dance recitals, boat lattes, matcha cruffins. I told her about the everything I'd left for dead and far behind in a world that was now so cartoonish that I struggled to imagine it for myself. Probably, I figured, just as hard as one of those poor fucks driven by climate disaster and war to flood northward by the millions, only to die crossing the Dust Bowl formerly known as northern Mexico, America's exclusion zone, which was where I realized we were now after the truck slid to a halt and Luis hoisted me out and dropped me in the dirt like a sack of yucca. Cuidado, Yaya chided him. Es una carga preciosa. Then she started up with that hacking cough again, Luis exchanged a concerned look with a scrawnier man carrying an M4 carbine. As my eyes adjusted to the burning light, I realized he was a boy of at most 15. "You're insane coming out here," I wheezed up at them. "The drones will be on us any minute." Yaya had recovered. "Levantarlo," she ordered. They pulled me to my feet. Yaya tried to untie the ropes, cursed her hands, and told the boy to do it. I teetered awkwardly as the wind whipped my dust into my face. "The drones won't spare him," I said, meaning the kid. Yaya looked at me impassively, then nodded at Luis, who reached down and pulled a whole patio section of the ground away. A buried tarp. Underneath, a pit. At the bottom, a seeker drone, 2 meters long. 3 of its 4 wings torn off, 2 of its 6 limbs twitching. Still alive, ready to tear me apart. I was on my back. I had blacked out. The boy hadn't yet undone the ropes from my legs, and I had simply fallen backward. I reached a pins and needles hand up to my head and felt swelling where it had hit a rock. Yaya scowled down at me, her face in shadow. "Stupido." "That thing's alive," I groaned. "It could be phoning its friends." "It isn't." "Why don't you shoot the battery?" "Because," she said, as to a child who didn't want to go to bed. "You are going to jailbreak it, David Gustafson. You are going to make it do as we say, and then you will catch me more." Can I get a quick time check?
12 minutes.
All right. The genius of compassionate interdiction was not that the drones would evolve to meet their objective in self-directed ways. It was that they would do this in a headless mode, completely isolated from any communication or oversight. Their actions would go unseen, their existence plausibly deniable. That was what made them the That was what made them the answer to the refugee problem that the American public, divided as it was across political ideology, was silently unanimous in wanting to go away. Because while the influx of hundreds of thousands of impoverished migrants had functioned as a long-running political issue, the influx of tens of millions was unimaginable, and it needed to not be happening. That stroke of genius was borne out by how the leak of the program's details did nothing to stop it. A few scapegoats were put out to pasture, a congressional committee announced, and then gradually forgotten by a frantic news cycle. After all, the violence predicted by David Gustafson was purely theoretical. No one had witnessed it happen. Under a different codename, the program powered ahead. In this sense, David Gustafson was not the name of someone who'd mattered at all.
Thank you, Paul. We have 5.5 minutes left in Paul's allotted 20-minute time, so if anybody has any questions for Paul, please fire away.
So matcha cruffins, is that real or is that science fiction?
I saw one.
Sorry?
I saw one.
You saw one where?
For a while.
Matcha cruffin?
Mamen.
Mamen?
Yeah.
Where's that?
That's where I get my quiche.
Okay.
Check it out.
Okay.
Apologies, speaking to the
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Yes, matcha cruffins exist.
Okay.
So Paul, we don't get a lot of science fiction stories here. Brian was the main contributor of science fiction stories to us. And that's not a genre that I have read a lot or have ever attempted at writing. So I'm wondering, because like when you first started reading, I think I got some imagery of Dune. So I'm wondering if you can talk about if there's any like sources of inspiration that helped you construct this world that you have. And also this Yaya character, I believe, White as Snow, right? Is his inspiration Edward Snowden? Just because like he seems to be, he's also a whistleblower, and if you've seen Edward Snowden, he's also really white.
Oh, you're referring to the David Gustafson.
Then yes, sorry, David Gustafson. Then yes.
Great questions. Well, that's really interesting you bring up Dune, whose score was, of course, led by Hans Zimmer, who also produced this song that inspired this story. It's a song that was from the movie Black Hawk Down, which is more obscure. But so in a way, maybe the inspiration crept through.
Right.
But I don't know, I grew up with a lot of what you might call white man science fiction that was all about the technology and the space and whatnot. And then later in my life, I discovered writers like Octavia Butler, which were very inspiring for me in that they showed me how science fiction could be used to really make inquiries about our society. And so, that's what I've been getting a little bit more interested in the last 10 years or so.
Very cool.
But yeah, the character David Gustafson definitely based off of Snowden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So what time frame is this be? Like somewhat near future, or you have an idea of that?
Yeah, good question. I think a little bit later in the draft, it gets into a little bit more like time period, but decades. Yeah. But I'm always a little bit less into the exactitude of world building. I tend to lean more into like character driven, emotion driven, and like this one, sometimes it gets a bit political. So the strict authenticity is something that I try to leave a little less examined, and I try to make things a little more vague in order to help set that up and keep it believable.
Yeah. Could you remind us of the title of the story again?
Oh, the working title is Synchrotone, but that's
Synchrotone,
that's
right.
the name of the song. So
Cool.
it's nothing really that meaningful. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I first really enjoyed it. I found the characters and the world very compelling. But can you please talk a little bit more about what you mean for this to ultimately sort of include music, or
Oh, absolutely.
music?
So, how much time do I have? Because I don't want
Minute and a
to
half.
talk your ear off. Okay, here, real quick. I get a lot of ideas, just inspiration from music. I have mild synesthesia, where a lot of the audio kind of crosses over into visual and emotional. And anyway, it's a big part of my process. And so I've been exploring this form where I interweave the narrative with the song as it actually plays. So that I'm hoping will come. It's just at the end, it's kind of the climax. And for those who are interested in checking out similar work, you can go to musicalfiction.com.
Sweet. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.